welcome to listening to Lancaster. I'm Diana Martin with Hourglass, and it's my pleasure to be joined today by Todd Roy, president of the Conestoga River Club. Thanks so much for joining me today, Todd.
Thanks for having me, Diana.
Before we jump in, I'd like to thank our sponsors of these episodes, Lap Electric, Landis Communities, and Martin Insurance for their support of Hourglass. Thanks so much, and let's jump right in. So, Todd, for anyone who has not yet heard of the Conestoga River Club, can you tell us a little bit about your organization and how it got started?
Well, the Conestoga River Club got started with the concept of improved public access to Lancaster County waterways, specifically the Conestoga River. It actually goes back to late 2018, early 2019, when I've always been a kayaker, always enjoyed the water, but bought my own kayak and started looking for places local where I could just throw the boat in the water and go for a couple of hours. And realized that the information and the facilities weren't really there to support, what I wanted to do. And those facilities that did exist, some of them are pretty challenging to actually use. You've got lack of maintenance, lack of improvements, eroding bank conditions where it's just challenging for someone with even very moderate mobility issues to get down safely and comfortably into the river. So I got this notion that I'm going to get some friends together and we're going to grab shovels and make everything better. And just about the time that was going to launch in 2020, COVID hit and I got furloughed. So the concept got picked up by Ad Crable, because I created a Facebook page at Lancaster newspaper. And the next thing you know, I had a community of people who were interested in what we were doing, and not just kayaking, but, the conservation needs. Allison Gibson from the Clean Water Partners reached out to me and said, this is really great. You've got this grassroots presence and a lot of buy-in. Let's talk about the conservation needs of the river, and that grew into the lack of inclusion, and I became aware of the fact that conservation is almost a class privilege. It's a financial privilege to have the spare time to go do volunteer efforts and so forth. So what is it and how did it get formed? The idea is, began with public access. It grew to include the health of the watershed and is finally rounding itself out in including those portions of the population that are not aware of the recreational and conservation possibilities of the Conestoga River. And what can we do to fix that? Get them involved, get them invested.
How many people are involved with the Conestoga River Club now?
We have 152 paid members.
Wow.
We have just over 400 that have signed up for our regular email blast and over 1,600 that participate on our Facebook page. So a pretty good selection. And even those Facebook numbers are, our analytics on that actually show that we have better than three quarters of that number interacting with our posts on a regular basis. So it's a strong community presence, and it depends on what you count as involved with. But we see anywhere from 15 to 20 volunteers at all of our cleanups, if not more. We had 80 on Earth Day. Our social activity calendar almost always sells out. So yeah, I'd say we have a very, very active group.
What are some of the ways people can get involved with the Conestoga River Club? I know I actually did a paddle with you for Water Week.
Yep.
I know, over the weekend you were doing a midnight paddle, you were doing cleanups. So what are some of the ways that people can either get involved or see you active out in the river?
The easiest way, is to go to ConestogaRiverClub.org and sign up for our email. I send out a monthly email with the calendar of activities, both recreational and volunteer opportunities. And then that's followed up with at least one or two more that's just sort of a news brief. This is our newsletter. This is what's happening here. This is what's in the future there. So that is the best way, is to go and get the email update. I would say, just look at the calendar on the website, but um, we don't always keep that as updated as we should. It's just one of those challenges of trying to keep everything going, and that falls to the wayside a little more often than I care to admit. So mea culpa. get the email.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. So like I said, I had a chance to join you on a paddle, and I got a little bit of your story. I know
Mhm.
you're from West Virginia, and
Yes.
I'm curious kind of what made you fall in love with the Conestoga River. I know you're really big on storytelling, so I was hoping you would share some of your Conestoga
Oh, she wants a
story.
story. She wants a story. um, the I'm going to tell you the origin story. We're going to go with the origin story because that's always where they start, right? Um, I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. It's one of my earliest memories of being, in a creek with family. I could not remember specifically, and I've asked family members. I don't know if it was a family reunion or just a picnic at one of the state parks, Audra State Park down near Elkins. Um, we were all down there. That my older cousins were jumping off the rocks on the far shore and into the river and having a good time. This was Shaver's Fork. And I'm sitting there, watching them, and my uncle Neil comes over and he says to me, he says, "Todd, what's wrong?" And I said, "Well, that looks like fun, but I'm scared." And he said to me, he said, "Son," he said, "you can go jump or you cannot." He said, "That's up to you. Today belongs to you." And if you jump and if you don't, it doesn't matter because it's your choice. And I'm going to love you anyway. And that has always been something that has stuck with me. And the first time that I got in the Conestoga and got in the boat and took off, and I was a little nervous because it was first time on a new waterway. I had no idea what I was getting into, and I found myself afraid. And I heard my uncle say to me, "I'll love you anyway." And it brought me home. So why did I get involved in the Conestoga? Because this is home. I've been here for 17 years now. I've found a community of friends. I have found, that extended family, that's outside of your blood, but just the friends that are closer than. I found a community that cares about me and that I care about. So I got in the Conestoga and realized this is where I'm going to leave my bones. This is home. And well, you take care of your house. So that's where it got started. That's where the story began. Yeah. Why? Because the Conestoga, Lancaster County is now my home. So,
Well, we're lucky to have you.
oh, yeah.
I wanted to ask, I saw that recently you got some grants in partnership with the Susquehanna Riverkeeper Association uh, to study and plan improvements from the about a 30-mile stretch of the Conestoga from I think Brownstown to Safe Harbor. I'd love to hear more about kind of that process and what you hope to accomplish and what that's going to look like.
Right. 32 and a half miles. Just the scope of the project is that first piece that I mentioned before, recreational access, to develop sort of a standard template of public facility. And those facilities are not just kayaking facilities, but also fishing or passive recreation or whatever it is that we feel is the need for a recreational point. We're also taking an inventory of the cultural and historical resources along that corridor. A really good example is that one of the favorite spots to visit by the water is the bridge at Pinetown. There is not only a lovely, covered bridge there, but just below it is the 200 plus year old, I think it's the Oregon Road Bridge that crosses Lititz Run. Single stone, single arch stone bridge that's over 200 years old and just soaked in, local history. So what is the project? It's to design and impact new recreational facilities, improved recreational facilities, take a look, an inventory and protect the cultural and historical resources, and then even further to advise some best management practices for those facilities for long-term maintenance, bank erosion mitigation and stabilization, invasive species removal, planting a good, healthy, riparian buffer, perhaps even getting into floodplain restoration so that we are reducing the high water scouring effects of events like Ida and Agnes. It's the plan is not putting shovels in the ground, but what we need to do to put shovels in the ground for the best comprehensive plan forward for the next 10 to 20 years, of projects.
This is really the first phase, is kind of
Right.
outlining what needs to be done. I think I read somewhere that you were thinking this study phase might be done by the end of spring. Does that seem like the timeline you're working on?
That is our timeline. It is optimistic. I'm going to be honest.
You're an optimistic guy. That's what I like about you.
But it's also one of those that even if you swing for the bleachers, that's how you hit a home run. So it is optimistic, but I don't think if we miss it, it won't be by much. So yeah, we're hoping to be complete by April, specifically because that is the DCNR grant window. In April, that would allow us to perhaps have a shovel-ready project ready to write for implementation and actually break ground on our first project.
This will essentially be almost a comprehensive plan for the Conestoga River. It talks about recreation, restoration, some of the historical, cultural components. Right. Has there ever been something like that for the Conestoga River in the past?
There have been conservation plans done in the past. The last one was done in 2019. That was actually spearheaded by the Community Foundation, the intermunicipal activity. I forget the exact. It was the intramural committee or the intermunicipal committee, and Representative Mike Sterla. Were the names that were on that. But that was very specifically focused on the conservation needs. There has also been a study published recently done by the Alliance for the Chesapeake, specifically Brian Gish, who just finished up a very comprehensive deep dive into the Peckway watershed. So what we're doing is different. I mean, it's definitely in spirit between those two. But it is not as comprehensive as really looking at long-term conservation remediation. It's the surface work, because and this is where I have to plug our partners, the Clean Water Partners. The bigger work has to begin in the headwaters, where we're getting so deep down into, you're talking about the insect and macroinvertebrate life, the water temperatures, the consistency of those water temperatures, and really investing those farmers and homeowners in the headwaters in protecting that source water. I see what we're doing as sort of the harbinger of that work, so that as we move downstream in the more comprehensive work, the Conestoga is ready. That we've already gotten healthy riparian buffers in place. We've already sort of elevated the profile to the public by making recreation more accessible. And the final piece then is that once we're looking at larger sections of the river, the Huck 9s, Huck 8s, then we're ready. The pre-work has already been done. We've pulled the tires out. We've stabilized the bank, and we're ready to get serious about the long-term solutions. So,
how does the recreation on the Conestoga compare to other areas? I mean, I agree with you. I think some of the access points are a challenge on the Conestoga. Yeah. Do you have sort of a model river in another community that you would like to see the Conestoga kind of be elevated to?
We do not. We actually do not. Something that should be noted is that this is a novel plan that we're doing. We are the river water trail managers with the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, and they have sort of a template in place for what your management plan should look like, but none of them have been as comprehensive and in scope as what we're doing. Now, I'm also going to put the caveat in that we have a very manageable mileage length here. I mean, we're 32 and a half miles sounds big, but when you're comparing over 270 some odd miles of the Susquehanna Water Trail, that's a whole different animal. This plan wouldn't really work in that corridor. It's too big. So what would more likely be the case is that what we're doing might apply to a section. Okay, we're going to do a small part. So we don't really have a model because we're sort of breaking the mold on what water trail management looks like a little bit. And this is where it becomes relevant. We had this conversation with Pennsylvania Fish and Boat, which has never granted planning monies before. Their grants have always been implementation, construction grants. So this is the first time that Fish and Boat has ever funded a comprehensive plan in partnership with DCNR and other funders because of the scope that we put together and how they feel that it might best influence better management of the water trails across the state. So
well, I'm excited to check out the plan when it comes out. I know you were mentioning earlier about some of the history of the Conestoga River, and I know you're a little bit of a history buff. So I wanted to see if there was maybe 3 pieces of history tied to the river that you wish that everyone in Lancaster County knew about.
Well, I'm going to start with the one that is most immediately relevant. 2022 is the 50th anniversary of the Clean Water Act, the very first federal environmental legislation of its type. That legislation was very strongly influenced by a woman named Dr. Ruth Patrick. She was an absolute maverick by every standards. She conducted a comprehensive study on water study on the Conestoga in 1948. Now, anybody who has ever studied women's history at any capacity recognizes that number one, a woman scientist in 1948 might not have been taken as seriously as her male peers. Number two, she broke the mold on how that research was done. In the 1940s, scientific disciplines stayed in their lane. Okay. Meteorologists dealt with meteorologists, climatologists dealt with climatologists, geologists here, biologists here. And what she did is she brought together a multidisciplinary team to take a total look at the health of. And that research literally changed the way the entire world views watershed health and watershed science. Starting with the biomes and the bugs and the macroinvertebrate and working it the whole way out. So the work we're doing now is based on that research. And it happened in the Conestoga. And she went on later, for some of those who don't know, was the founder of the Stroudwater Institute, one of our strong friends and allies in this fight to improve conservation. So that's thing number one that should be noted. Going back further, there's the obvious. There's the Conestoga covered wagon, where you can see the foundation of where they were built, paddling down. Fulton, Robert Fulton and his stern wheel paddle boat, prototype being tested along the corridor of County Park. I mentioned the bridge at Pinetown before, which was part of the Lehman Rifle Works, which produced a significant number of the Pennsylvania long rifles that supplied our military, in the early 1800s. I could just go on and on and on. I think another really important point would have to be the fact that Lancaster waterways are the reason that Lancaster, again, we do a lot of things first. Lancaster went from settlement to active trade and viable trade hub in a decade. Okay. When you're talking about new settlement development, it usually takes a generation or two to reach the point of, just raw settlement to, trade center. Usually takes a generation or two to establish that. But Lancaster waterways, how fertile our fields are and the farmland that we have, allowed that to happen at an accelerated pace. Mills were developed, commerce was developed, and literally in the early 1800s, Lancaster had one of the first freshwater ports where you could book passage at Reigert's Landing for England because of that trade potential. So there's a lot of history in Lancaster. A lot of it's tied to our waterways and how it shaped who we are as a community now. And it's getting lost because the profile of our waterways is not highlighted as it should be. So
I think we talk a lot in Lancaster about clean water, of course, with our connection to the Chesapeake Bay, and we have challenges with agriculture runoff, stormwater runoff, these nutrients, sediment in our waterways. But I think the flip side of that is we have a lot of strong leaders in the community who are really committed to cleaning our waterways. You mentioned the Lancaster Clean Water Partners. One of our, local legislators just helped pass the Clean Streams Act to get more funding for clean water, especially in Lancaster County. As someone who spends a lot of time on the river, I just would love to hear, how do you sort of see that playing out? Do you see some of these improvements happening? How do you feel about the health of the waterways?
There are two things that I see. One of the things that I see is that I do see increased recreation, and that increased recreation is not leading to an increase in debris left behind. I mean, the people who are going out and fishing and kayaking are not leaving behind the same kind of trash that I saw 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when I first started paddling. So in general terms, just the litter is an improvement. I can't say definitively that I can I shouldn't say I can quantify, like sediment improvements or nitrogen sulfate phosphate, improvements or remediation, because I'm not one of the guys that tests it regularly. And I haven't looked at that, that data to really compare. But the other thing that I do see is that awareness is growing, and it's growing rapidly within our community, with the interaction with our partners, with the projects coming together. And it's not just the Clean Water Partners, but all of the agencies that make up that partnership. Penn State Ag and Environmental, the Chickies Creek Line, the Millport, Conservancy. I mean, the Little Conestoga Watershed. I could just go on and on and on. In all of these small, Donegal Trout Unlimited, all of these people are pulling on the same wheel, and there is progress being made, tangible. I'm not the guy to ask those questions because I'm not the scientist. I'm the cheerleader. You go talk to the coach if you want a better answer to that. But the concern that I do have, and one of the things that I don't see improving, is that I still see a lot of negligent dumping. And that's not just tires. It's things like, I'll float down the river and I'll see where somebody dumped their yard trimmings, down over the bank, waiting for the high water to take it away. That's illegal. And the reason it is illegal is because you are now putting your lawn, which was treated by, True Green or, whoever, and putting all of those clippings directly into the waterway. That added, that's not okay. Leaving trash to be carried away, tires to be carried away. There's still a lot of that happening, more than it should be. And another concern is just seeing entire herds of livestock wander out into the river. And the response, one of the ironies is that people are very much up in arms about the combined sewer overflow problem from the city of Lancaster, and they see the cows waiting in the river and go, "Oh, that's cute. The cows are hot." Well, you realize that that's also, putting raw animal waste into the waterway, and it's not okay.
Mhm.
So there's a long road ahead of us. I do see progress. I do see, concentrated effort, but there's still a lot to do.
So maybe we'll just end on your hope. What's your hope for the future of maybe the Conestoga and just Lancaster's waterways?
My hope, and if I have done my job correctly, is that 20 years from now, some bright-eyed and bushy-tailed young person is going to go, I want to do what he did. And that passion will find another generation to take anchor in. What is my hope? My hope is that we change the way the community views our waterways, that they take ownership of it, that they find stewardship of them in their own lives and activities, that they become progressively involved in those improvements. We've got decades of work ahead of us to get to those goals. I mean, the Clean Water Partners use the phrase "clean and clear by 2040." That's still pretty. That's a lot of work between here and there, and it's going to take blood. It's going to take sweat. It's going to take grinding out long hours and finding the right collaborations and partnerships to make things happen. So, what's my hope is that this effort continues to grow, continues to spread, that we engage with everyone. Okay, that we have that diverse community invested in our waterway health, as diverse as the community is of Lancaster, period. So.
Is there anything I didn't ask you about, Todd, that you want to make sure people know about? And if not, can you maybe just give us that website again where people can sign up for your newsletter and stay in touch?
Sure. I mean, there's always something that I could talk more about. There's an entire rabbit hole of conversations, but no, for people who want to get involved, for people who want to, with the Conestoga River Club, they can go to our website, ConestogaRiverClub.org, sign up for the email. I try not to beat you to death with emails. You'll get 2, maybe 3 a month. One of them is always the social calendar for the month. The only other thing I would say is that if you can't do anything else, find your passion. Maybe it's in your backyard. Maybe it's in with your neighbors. If you want to get involved and you want to make a difference, be a good neighbor. Share your passion with your neighbor. Do that thing that makes your square inch of the world a better place.
That's great. And we'll definitely share once this plan comes out that y'all are working on for the Conestoga River. We'll share that with our audience. I'm sure people will be anxious to check that out and kind of just get an idea of what's in store over the next 10, 20 years as we all continue to improve the Conestoga River. So thanks so much for being with us today, Todd. And for everyone listening, you can find more episodes of Listening to Lancaster on our YouTube channel or on our website, which is hourglasslancaster.org. Thanks.
Thank you, Diana.